Hey guys, Melissa here, going to go over some more on the gangster history linked into Hot Springs and Al Capone. As you guys know from my other shorts that I've put up on my home channel, and then from my last report on Rumble, I don't know if I ever did get it over to BitChute. I probably also placed it on my home channel though. I had been to Hot Springs recently and got to go to a private mine, and of course went and did all the history surrounding what had become the first national park and that was placed into a national reserve as one of the first parks under President Andrew Jackson. And as I said before, and as you guys already would know, the history there in Hot Springs is so rich. I had been called to go there some time ago, and so I'd been trying to get to Arkansas in between, taking care of the family, my small business, and you guys know how it goes. So I'm going to get this part of the report done today, as we've been doing on my home channel. I'm doing a porch makeover. We're redoing a front flower bed where we took out an old bush that I said, I finally agreed with Nate when he said, just let me take the rest of it out, when we took part of it out. And I said, at first I was kind of hanging on to it because I'd made it healthy and brought it back healthy, but it got so voluminous. The rest of the two bushes that were left had grown into one. And I stood back and I thought, this overpowers and ages the house. So it's time for an update. So today it keeps acting like it's going to rain, so I was waiting to go sand with my sheet sander until I'm certain that it won't be raining. And it is muggy again, but that's okay. Did a stone path yesterday and it looks awesome. Found a local stone place to finish that path off, and then use some old flagstone that I already had, and the path turned out amazing. So I can't wait to get back out there, but I'm very happy to be with you guys right now, and let's just get right to it. So in speaking of the gangster era over there in Hot Springs, I ran across this guy while doing the research and investigative reporting. His name was David, and he grew up hearing about the legends of Hot Springs. He found when using FOIA that there were FBI offices all over America, of course, that had files on Hot Springs. Why was that? Was there a larger crime syndicate and far more involved than people realized? The claim was that the files revealed a misconception that many locals had, that gambling had flourished because elected officials simply turned a blind eye and had nothing to do with organized crime. So it's interesting when you're dealing with some of the agencies. I've talked before about the idea that these agencies, whether it be the CIA or Five Eyes with these other people's, or countries, I should say, intelligence agencies, they will say that they're not doing certain things to their own citizens in their country, but come to find out, they do it for one another. Five Eyes. We've talked about this many times, so I won't spend a lot of time here, but we have found the same thing to be true for some of these agencies, and you guys have seen some of those memes out there where instead of FBI, we might turn, one might turn the last two letters around because, right? And I always like to remind people, those of us who have been doing this for years, we are not saying that every single person that's connected, I mean, I know some of the people, so not every single person that works for these agencies is corrupt. Many times we're finding that the corruption is far higher up. And yes, they will pull and bring in as many as they can from the lower rungs of the ladder that may not be as high up. And then they will use them as their, I don't know how else to say it, slaves, so to speak. But they will also use forms of, blackmail against them. So you guys know how this works, right? Those of you who have been with me for a long time. And then plenty of you already innately understand or have seen some of this go on, dependent on where you have worked or where you have gone or whether you've been out in the field or boots on the ground approach. But this was why, by the way, back in the day, President John F. Kennedy had talked about shattering the CIA, okay? Now, as I've said before, which is why my material had been taken down, right? Is that, the dark side has what works as a web, or, a web is really the only way I can put it. This web or this entity with these tentacles that go everywhere, and then it's like a labyrinth. So the dark side, those who are up to no good, are virtually in every single sector of society. And those who claim they're not, they're still wanting to brainwash others. They're likely part of the group that tries to control or bully. But humanity, when they connect with their soul and their inner source, you already know it. You can feel it. And then, like I said, those of us who have been out in the field and have worked in various systems, we have experienced it firsthand. So the reason I like to remind is because I do know some good people in some of these places. They just don't always realize how corrupt it is in the upper reaches of their, of wherever they're working, whether it be this agency I'm talking about right now or other agencies. But it only makes sense, doesn't it? I like to remind people, those who have read the Bible, that it told you right away in Genesis, the first book that they let you see, in the first book that, the serpent was the most subtle beast of the field. So in other words, very manipulative, very subtle. This is why I've spent some of my articles, honing in on narcissists, because plenty of people out there and even people on my team have had, whether it be family members or people close to them, who they start understanding. They didn't see it before, but they start seeing how narcissistic they are. And they start realizing, these people keep trying to mold others around them, whether it be you who they're targeting, trying to target and trying to turn into a victim. We don't have to be victims. We can just, basically stand up for ourselves and stop being a victim or stop counting down to them. But for being a victim, you can say no to it, and you don't always see it at first when you're close to people that, hey, it's selfish of them to try to force you to be the way they want, to try to say you're selfish. And they're generally saying you're selfish if you're not doing their bidding or doing something the way that they want. I had someone like slam. I'm used to doing reporting, and I don't always use a device. I do for much of my research, obviously, and putting my articles and my reports together. I use the internet when I need to, and I use digital when I need to, but I'm still a little old school from back in the day. I would worry that, we would have some of our content come down, and I get, you can have multiple places to save it, but my surefire way of saving it was to make sure that I've got really important information written down. So I would take notes, and I had someone slam it out of my hands and was just so furious and told me to stop taking notes. And then I realized it was because they were afraid that, their behaviors and a direct link to what they were doing would become obvious to everyone else. And they were so angry that I wouldn't do things the way they did, where they like to, it's sort of that Jezebel, the spirit of Jezebel that we've talked about, where they always wanted to be constantly, updating people online as to what was going on, constantly telling people, what they were doing and having photos and updates of themselves. And they were furious that I wasn't providing, stopping with my day and constantly giving them updates from a boots on the ground approach so that they could, do their thing of where they wanted to show people what they were doing. It was weird. It was just weird. But this is what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about these agencies, I'm not saying everyone is corrupt. It's just that we do have some that are corrupt, that are high up, and then they bring in others. And then for these narcissists that I'm talking about that might even be close to you, a lot of times what's gone on is what we have found, and I've seen evidence of, and I saw evidence in this case that I had just spoken of as an example, where they open a portal, and that portal that they open doesn't just affect themselves. Sadly, many of these people have opened that portal while they still have children, sometimes even young children, or whether they're older children living, that they're with at the time. And that opened portal then allows these entities to attach to them and their children. And unless they are willing to observe themselves instead of blaming everybody around them, it will not change. And this is what I see right here. I know that seemed like quite involved, right? In like another layer, but it all connects, right? It all connects. Synchronicity, as I've talked about. And I'm not even going to try to explain that anymore, because I get haters and people that come from both sides, by the way, which once again, there can be infiltrators that are saying they're of the light and they're not. But from both sides, I will get a lot of just hate against what I'm doing. And that kind of goes back to the narcissistic thing of, they're saying that we're selfish because we won't do it their way. So who's really being selfish? Because we're not forcing them to view something the way we see it. We're just telling them what we've experienced or the evidence that's out there. And then they're getting angry that we won't operate the way that they want. So see, there's the reversal. There's the flip. There's the boomerang of who's really being selfish. They're caught, the pot calling the kettle black, for one of those old terms that just puts it into perspective. What they're saying about you is what they're literally doing to you in those cases. And that's what I'm seeing with this is they're trying to push in that sentence, gambling. Some people believed in hot springs, and they probably, if they were doing it from their gut, trust your gut, if they were seeing things and then trusting what they felt vibrationally and with their gut, that gambling flourished because elected officials simply turned a blind eye and had nothing to do with organized crime. What I have seen by doing these investigations, and you already know it without me telling you this, there is truth to that there were. We see it right now in present day, don't we? There is a verse in the Bible. I think it might be in Ecclesiastes, but don't quote me on that. I mean, look it up yourself and get back and tell me whether I'm right or wrong. Need to know. That says there is nothing new under the sun. That's because in each segment, even if you go back to ancient history, each segment of time periods, and time isn't what people think it is, once again, okay? So those of you who know, you already know. I won't spend any more time on that. But what we are told to perceive as periods of time, the same thing was going on in ancient history that is going on today. When you hear certain songs about, and I've got to do a report on this, songs even from, rap artists about PEDO. I'm spelling it out in case I put this on my YouTube, which before got RID of me before for giving evidence and spilling truth because of the industry that I worked in and actually saw and experienced firsthand some of these things. So, and they don't like that. They don't like when people have evidence and verified information that cannot be denied. And when they try to send their trolls after you and they can't unhinge you because nothing trumps truth. Nothing trumps truth. That's just what the truth always rises to the top. But anyhow, just like how when you hear those rap artists, and there's one that says, "Not like us." I need to do a report on that. The lyrics to that are, whoa, right? So that, of course, when I heard it, when I was traveling to a site not too long ago, I thought, oh, wow. So some of these people that are considered mainstream are now speaking out, which is good, about things we've been talking about for, honestly, what we've been seeing and archiving for, at least 2 decades. And then some people have done it for far longer. I always say God bless them, because wow, they've been in the trenches forever, having to see it and then being told constantly, yeah, something will be done about this, and then not seeing it done. But something has been being done about bringing this forward into humanity's consciousness, so that more of us are working together to not just be aware, but to help put a stop to it. And that is great. But anyhow, that sort of activity that is beyond wicked was going on in ancient times too. I mean, this is why God said in the Bible, I used to talk about this, don't feed your children to who? Baal, the fire god, because there were certain people that were in tune to the darkness that would do that in order to be blessed. And it's very much what we have seen transpire in modern day with some of these people who are considered, people get angry when I say this, because they say, stop calling them elites. They're not elite. But they are perceived as, people are brainwashed and told they're the elite. So those who are perceived as the elites, I get that, everyone is to be equal, but people are not perceived as equal, and we all know it, because many of us have been treated terribly, not just from the side of darkness, but from those who pretended to not be with the darkness. Okay, so that took a turn. I didn't mean to stay there too long, but my point was what's going on in present day. And when I hear people say, oh, it's never been this horrible. Oh, yes, it has. It's been as horrible, and then some people might even argue and say even worse at times. In my brain, being a protector of children and working in various industries where I took cases firsthand, there is nothing worse than what happens to, and it's not just the children, obviously, it's just that at times they have no voice. When you're an adult, your brain is fully developed, so there's more that you can maneuver. When you're a child, you are at everyone's mercy around you, because there is no one, unless you run away and escape everybody, there is no one that understands or speaks on your behalf at times. So thank God for all of you out there who are also dedicated to helping free these people. And that's why in Ezekiel I've covered the passage on buy thy traffic, when it's talking about the king and the prince in the Bible, the wicked one, and it was by trafficking of organs, trafficking of people, the trafficking of goods and services, trafficking of everything. All right, so it feels like in order to get the scope, because I'm always looking at the overhead view, I know it seems like I went off topic, but it's because these agencies that present themselves to be protecting the people, or the intelligence agencies, who have rules for thee but not for them, and we saw this in the deep state going on and still see it, there is no way when they're trying to claim that, oh, it's not what people thought, where, these people in high places and these politicians are turning a blind eye. We know for a fact that's not true, because we see it virtually in every industry, is what I'm trying to get at. And don't forget the other information I covered, where there's a back door for the FBI and other agencies that was purposely set in place so that it could be weaponized against humanity. And in our case, the American people, because in Hillary's day, there was this software that was stolen from a group, and it was called Promise Software. And I witnessed that firsthand because of the systems I've worked in, and also seeing the back door in for law enforcement and other agencies, where they can get people that they blackmail and control in order to get information and access for children. And this happens not just in these law enforcement agencies, but it also happens in obviously the intelligence agencies, and then also schools. That's right. That's right. There's a backdoor in for them. So when you're wondering how did they get access to certain individuals, children, how did they know about certain cases? That is why. And I'll try to remember because I've been doing this for so long and there's so much information, as you guys know. I'll try to remember to come back in and put my article about that. It goes way back into the history of the Clintons and what was really playing out there. Some of you know bits and pieces of it, but it's quite interesting when you see that whole other scope of how they've been able to get in there and control people. All right, so back to Hot Springs, and I've taken up a big portion trying to get the scope of it, but I felt I have to go with the vibration because there are people out there that weren't with me years ago and haven't heard all of these things that I used to cover quite a bit and put in little bits and pieces of the puzzle and showing how they connected. So that's why it's important. So thanks to those of you who already knew for having patience. But it all connects, as you know. It's like this huge web that's all interconnected, and trying to unravel it and show those who have been asleep for so long what's really going on, the illusion they live in, is daunting, isn't it, at times? But we're all doing it together, aren't we? So some felt the reason Hot Springs survived had a lot to do with political corruption. In my opinion, onto something. Sorry, it took me 20 minutes to explain why. So that's just how it is. It's not my fault that their web is so interconnected, by the way, trolls that get on and have a fit at how much information is involved. It's not my fault. I'm just shining a light on it. And yeah, it's ugly, very ugly at times. So by the early 60s, Hot Springs had reached a tipping point. It is said that the huge building boom in the 1960s was in anticipation of gambling being legalized there. Some feel the 1960s architecture is dominant, including that of the vapors. So crowds came to gamble, and big-time entertainers came to entertain those crowds. I don't know any of these people, but maybe some of you have heard of them. I'm sorry if I don't pronounce some of their names correctly, but Dick Contino, the Novelties. I don't know. If some of you know, please comment and tell me what in the world, right? Because maybe you've heard of them or maybe not. So Rosemary Clooney, and I wondered when I saw her face, because I've got a thing for faces. I used to have to go through and, show, disguises and things because the face, even when they're put in disguise, reminds me sort of, honestly, but I could be off base, of George Clooney. So Dave Gardner, I've heard that last name Gardner, but I've not heard of him. Senor Princess Toddy Fields. Her face seems sort of familiar, but I do not know who she is. I could look them up, but we need to move along. Al Martino, the Vagabonds. Interesting name, right? So during those 4 to 5 years, Hot Springs saw a spike and had 5 million visitors per year. On January 3, 1963, the Vapors was bombed. The next day, when pictures were on the front page of the Arkansas Gazette, it was confirmation of the hold illicit gambling had on Hot Springs. So let's look at this. Hold on here. Okay, so I had said Al Capone, and now with the Vapors, they're talking about, the 60s. So just to remind us all, he was born just before the turn of the century, so 1899, and then he died 1947, so they say. With Al Capone, I had understood there was also an incident at the vapors. So now I'm trying to confirm. So I'm going back here. I covered some of this in my last video, but it's been a long time now. It's been a while. Been doing other things. So now let's look at this. It says, of course, hot springs gets its name from the thermal springs waters flowing out of the ground, yada, yada. It's hard to tell exactly how long people have been visiting the springs. Native Americans called this area the Valley of the Vapors. And that's what I had remembered looking at when I was looking at the Vapors nightclub. And it makes sense why they would name it that, because of the area they're in. And we did see this place when we were there, and it's interesting what has become of it. So it is said to have been a neutral territory where all tribes could enjoy its healing waters in peace. So Spanish and French settlers claimed the area in the mid-1500s. In fact, famous explorer Hernando de Soto was the first European to visit hot springs. So deep history, 1541. Another reminder that some people will think that, you know, the United States, and they'll be surprised when I tell them, like over in Arizona, where I lived when I was a very small child. So I'm not saying that I was there in these places when I was very little, but it is known that because I worked with some people at the University of New Mexico on some of the artifacts, it is known that inside of the Grand Canyons and some of those caves are artifacts that look just like Egyptian statues. So just a reminder that this land has been here a long time. It wasn't just from the creation of, oh, you know, the Pilgrims left England in order to escape tyranny, which looks like we're kind of back in the same boat at times, doesn't it? But you know what I'm saying. In other words, deep, deep history. So in the hot springs were such a coveted natural wonder that in 1832, okay, we talked about that, he designated it as the first federal reservation. So America's first national park, predating Yellowstone by 40 years, which is impressive, right? So in 1862, during the Civil War, Arkansas Governor Henry Massey Rector feared that Little Rock might be captured by Union troops. Okay, so then he had all the state records relocated to Hot Springs, and from May 6th through July 14th of that year, Hot Springs served as the state capital. So the Arlington Hotel was completed in 75 and was the largest hotel in that area. And as I told you, it was Al Capone who would rent out like the 4th floor. And I do have footage of that. I'm not sure if we'll get to it today because, you know, it's been so long since I've been with you, and I felt that some of the people needed to hear the whole scope of how things connected. So maybe another time. But I've also dealt with probably the last couple of reports on that Army-Navy hospital that first combined general hospital treating patients from both the Army and Navy that opened in downtown. And I've shown you some of that footage of the building and the pool that was found underneath, and then some of the tunneling that runs under Hot Springs. So between 92 and 1923, 8 bathhouses. Okay, I already covered that. So in just a decade, the area changed from a rough frontier town to an elegant spa city. And I covered all of that, showed you guys some of the photos last time. So here's the part we need to get to. Visiting Hot Springs, Arkansas today, it's hard to imagine the city as a hotbed for organized crime such as gambling, prostitution, and bootlegging. But from the late 1800s to the mid-1900s, especially in the 1930s, Hot Springs was a popular hangout for Al Capone, Frank Costello, Bugs Moran, Lucky Luciano, and other infamous mobsters. Last time I covered some of the linkage between Al Capone, where he came out of over there in the New York area, and who his partner was. So I won't get into that right now. It's necessary to reflect on the corruption that had been going on there for decades. As early as the mid to late 1800s, Hot Springs had been involved in illegal gambling. At that time, 2 families controlled these activities, the Flynns and the Durans. The 2 families constantly fought over the city's gambling rights, a competition that eventually led to the famous Hot Springs gunfight in 1899. So this would have been before Capone's time, obviously, because he was born just before, like right then, wasn't it? 1899. Okay, so during this realm of local rule, hotel room saloons and back alleys were the hot spots for cards and crafts and casino type gaming of all kinds. Hot Springs offered Las Vegas style amenities before there was a Las Vegas. This is what is key. It's key because I used to visit Las Vegas and did so just a few years ago, visited again the dam area on a super hot day. I've covered this in some of my reports. And then I also had, been on the streets and been in some of the areas that are considered the underlayer or the underground of Las Vegas. And there literally are tunnel people that live there. For those who want to say that this is, conspiracy theory, I will remind that ABC had done a report way back in the day, is what I understood, of those tunnel people and their lives there. But there's also a test site in Las Vegas, and this is more well known by mainstream now than it used to be. Some of my family was involved with some of those areas, so we always knew about it, but I started realizing even as a kid, not everybody knew about what went on at some of these test sites and labs. So it was like, an interesting perspective. But I have noticed that more and more people realize the labyrinth and what is really out there now more than ever. So if that's out there in Las Vegas, I guess is my point. And we all well know it. And those who don't, go start poking around. You're going to see evidence. I've done some reporting, but there's other information out there. And they haven't been able to pull all, they try so hard, all of my evidence and information off because I have been staggered, I guess you might say, in various platforms and places where they can't get to it all at once. So, and then of course I have other various ways of archiving. It's just voluminous, as you can imagine. So my point is really think about Las Vegas. Think about what was involved to get that set up. Think about the history. Think about the known mob activity. Some people would compare mobs, gangsters, same thing, right? Okay, don't get mad at me, mobsters and gangsters. It's just, it's true. So, then some people would say, and even I have experienced, that, sometimes there is this rule of law that is not met by a co-opted government that is enforced by another group. And that's the only way I can say that. So that's how I'm going to say it. I've experienced it. So then I go back to, I don't know how else to say this. God looks at the heart. So sometimes those that people might perceive as being wicked or evil are not. And then sometimes it's the other way too. Someone that they might trust is. And some of this has gone on with those who have been involved in undercover and in projects that would be similar to, shall I say, Sound of Freedom. And what you go back to is who's trying to stop that information from getting out. So then it shines a light on who might truly be corrupt and who isn't. Do you see what I'm saying there? I'm only saying this for the benefit of those who say that I am. For the others, this is a riddle, and that's okay. That means it's not their time to know. So, thank God, though, Sound of Freedom did get made, and there's a reason for that. So, in telling you that, let's think about this. So, Hot Springs was the place to be for this type of activity that eventually ended up in the place of Las Vegas, where things were already going on, by the way. I mean, they try to tell you that, they didn't start doing such and such until later on. No, liars. This land has been there forever. So through illegal and a felony under Arkansas law, the betting was no secret to the majority of local authorities. Police officers, judges, and even the mayor turned a blind eye. So see, in the other article we're hearing, well, people thought this, but that wasn't necessarily the case. But here we're hearing different. And this is from hotsprings.org. Now, some people will go, well, it depends on which writer is talking. Yeah, I get that. But what we usually have to do is we have to look at all sides. All right. And then I'm going to tell you this. The truth is generally in the middle, and it's a very, very narrow path. That's the easiest way to say it. So they're saying because they were either paid off by one of the families or were participating in the gaming themselves. So this goes back to what I was telling you about. This is why I had to cover it. See? There is the net or a web, or think of it as an entity, almost like a spider, where it's got these tentacles or some sort of a monster. These tentacles. I almost don't want to call it that because you have power over it, right? We have power over it. But there it is. And a lot of people, I'm not going to say they're turning a blind eye, but that's what's happening because that veil is still there and they haven't woke up. But those tentacles stretch everywhere. And my goodness, whoever they can trick and fool, just like that serpent did in the Garden of Eden way back in the day. Or, well, time isn't what we think it is. So at that point, in that dimension, it's the same thing. If it's subtle enough to trick you, it will trick you. It will. It's almost like a frog being boiled, where it's soothed into, oh, this is nice. Yes, I want this warmth. And then it's by the time it realizes, wait a minute, the temperature has become, awful to where I practically can't stand it. And by that time it's too late and it's just being boiled alive. Or it's like something, slowly squeezing around you, right? It's like a boa constrictor, just, like lulling you, like hypnotizing you, and then slowly that, all right? By the time people realize it, it's too late. But that is what people like me and all of you out there that have taken an oath or have at least said, I'm going to stay in tune with the light, and you're trying to raise everybody else's consciousness and awareness. You're trying desperately to get them to wake up and see that they are being tricked and fooled. But they don't have to be tricked and fooled, do they? They can wake up and go, wait a minute. All is not as we have been told. There's something underlying, something almost mysterious at times, like a spell has been cast going on, right? So that with those tentacles stretching out everywhere, and absolutely it is in every single sector of society. You have those who are for the dark side that are blackmailing and trying to pull in others. Then you have infiltrators, those who claim to be part of the light but aren't. This is why it's so confusing. And this is why, the dark side and those who would say, well, it's Satan doing it. Okay, well, but you don't have to agree to it. Don't give your consent away. Yes, Satan's going to do it every time. He thrives in a state of chaos. So take yourself out of the chaos, center yourself, tune in to what God, who others might call the source creator, he is the creator, the source of all. Tune into that and cast the rest off so that you can be centered and see what the truth is. And that's how you can tell every time. It becomes glaringly clear. And I say this after working in various industries where you could start to see the straight and narrow very quickly. Gathered the information, but started to see, and you could start unraveling it. And that's where we're at. I hope that makes sense. I know it's crazy. It seems crazy, but those of us trying to expose the crazy, we're not the crazy ones. All of the insanity and the tangled mess that we're trying to shine a light of their darkness on is what's crazy, right? So here's what happened. Leo McLaughlin was elected mayor of Hot Springs in 1926 and fulfilled a campaign promise to allow gambling. Illegal gambling had long been a staple of life in Hot Springs. But McLaughlin took it to a new level using voter fraud and other unlawful tactics to drive his political machine. Why does it feel like it's Groundhog Day and we're like reliving the same cycle over and over and over and over, like we are in a loop, right? Because I might have said this recently, and even if I did, I don't care. I used to also teach, so imagine how many times I would repeat things, because repetition is a way to absorb information. The cycle. How do you get out of a cycle? You stop repeating the same mistakes. It wasn't just, as I told you guys before, we have to run someone like Trump through a political party, because that's how the stooge stage system is set up right now. And we can't just go in with and say, we're done. No, we have to work through this flawed system, because many people perceive that system is not everybody, but there are those that perceive that system is not controlled and owned. More and more are recognizing, right? But we need to mitigate damage to civilians. We need to mitigate harm that can come to others. You can't just completely topple an entire system and not have a lot of fallout, even if so much of it is based on a sandy, fake foundation. All right? Remember the little song that Sunday school children used to sing? Was it the foolish man built his house upon the sand. Foolish man. And then there was the wise man. Wise man built his house upon the rocks. Okay, so the forefathers set up our foundation. The ones that weren't, they were not, all of them, controlled and owned by the dark side. If you go back and you look, there were presidents before George Washington. George Washington actually had visions that came to him through God's source, through God, through the Creator. All right? So this is nothing wonky. This is nothing from, the dark side. If you want to call it magic, let's just look at it like that. Let's pretend like it's magic. There's dark magic, there's good magic, or there's operating in the spirit realm. And when Christians get very frustrated about this, they need to remember, why is there a Holy Spirit? I don't know how Christians forget. Some of them, I'm not saying all of them, but some people who call themselves Christians will get very upset when I talk like this. So I'm just trying to preface with, if there's not a spirit world out there, then why is it called a Holy Spirit? And how are humans supposed to be separate from God? They always treat us like, how dare you talk about having God's spirit in you? Well, I always go back to, I had a narcissist say that to me once, and I always go back to, I would rather have God's spirit. I'd rather have that in me than Satan's spirit. I mean, there's one or the other, right? So that always confuses me. So honestly, they need to be in tune with God's spirit. So if you're dealing with that, then in the good spirit realm, or for those who like to call it magic, in the good magic's realm, you've got, you're going to be spoken to through the Holy Spirit or through God, through God's ways of doing it. The dark side, yes, they have their spells and their magic and then the good side, the side of light, the side that is in tune with the one that created them, who gave humanity that God spark, you know, you can use your power to cast out whatever the darkness is throwing at you. So everyone can be trying to remember that the voter fraud that they're talking about, probably needed to spell that out, because I'm not even talking about, I'm talking about back here in history, using voter fraud and other unlawful tactics to drive his political machine back in Hot Springs way, way back in the day. Nowadays, this has occurred not just on one side, is what I was getting at. The whole political party thing is a way to divide. And the only reason we have to keep working in it is it's like you have to mitigate damage for people. So even though there is a co-opted government, have to work within what people perceive to be real. And behind the scenes is where the genuine republic, this was always intended to be a republic, and all republics, not states, but republics have their own, just like each human has their own sovereignty, have their own sovereignty and their own decision-making skills. But right now, as what is perceived in the show, in the big scene for the facade, and that's why we say enjoy the show, right now, you have to work within the confines of their two-party system. And yes, there are infiltrators and own people on all sides, so more of that confusion that works in the favor of the chaos and darkness, right? So this has occurred on both sides, is what I'm trying to get at. Because back in the day, and people get mad at me for saying this also, but this is just plain truth. Go look it up. Bush was never supposed to be president, all right? So they ran that. They used voter. What did I used to call? I used to have a name for it during, when I was reporting on it right there when it was happening real time. I used to have a name, but you know what I'm saying. I think I even had a different name for, VOTER. But anyhow, Al Gore was supposed to win that. And I don't care who gets mad at me. I'm not saying that, I'm a fan of either. My point is if you don't have a system that you can trust, what's the point of using it? I think we've all seen that there was no point, because it's all mucked up. It's all a facade. It's all ran. And if they don't run it one way, they'll run it another, because there were plenty that would say, oh, well, you're going to have to go back to old school paper ballots, which I love my paper as much as I do the digital. But I see, we deal with hackers, we deal with this, we deal with that. But I showed evidence of how they were running the paper also. Had boxes. We had somebody boots on the ground right in there where there was a group of workers just signing them themselves, and the whole mail-in thing. I gathered evidence for that. But there comes a point where it doesn't matter how much evidence you gather, how much you show them. Those that want to tune in to the show and the drama will. That's all there is to it. So, those on the side of the light, and those who have taken an oath, and those who have been working, and I understand you get tired. It can be exhausting and tiring, and it can be overwhelming. Don't tune into that. As soon as that starts to happen, go back to communing with God, the Creator, what you want to call Him, the one that created you. Many call Him God. Go back to that. Center yourself. Trust your instincts. Trust your gut. This is what we've always said. Same thing. Nothing has changed. Trust yourself. Research for yourself. Think for yourself. And as you know, they are piping all sorts of frequencies at you. But you can learn how to get more to just a sense of balance and harmony, where you tune all of that out, meditate, pray, focus on your breath, do what works for you is what I'm saying. And I know I am hitting like everything all at once here, but it's because I'm working with a lot of people that are at a different leg of their journey. And I know, like I said, time is not what people think. So I'm trying to look at it not just in a linear fashion, but really, people wake up at different times. Those who will choose not to wake up or to never wake up, there will be about 20%. So we're still dealing with that. All right, well, I probably need to like wrap it up because I didn't mean for this to be a long one. I almost feel like I might as well finish out the hour and read the rest of this because, I mean, this history is amazing. It really is. And the parallels, the synchronicity, and the whole, like I said, with the verse in Ecclesiastics where there's nothing new under the sun. It just rings true. It rings true. Just like, you know, that frequency that rang off the coast of Mayotte back in 2018 around, you know, the same year that we had that blue light up in New York. And so those of you who are hearing me say this and watched the Aurora Borealis and what happened recently with that, all connected, all tied in. If you don't know what I'm talking about, start researching or go read some of my articles on my Steemit. I actually got a video of that I may have dropped to Rumble. It's definitely on my BitChute of all of that. And the vibrations, the numbers, the evidence is off the charts. And this was even reported for those frequencies off the coast of Mayotte. And boy, there's some interesting things over there. That was even recorded in National Geographic. I had an aunt, a great aunt, when I was growing up that had collected National Geographic magazines. And I always credit her with one of the people that caused me to be a voracious reader because I loved going to her house. She'd even let me take some home, almost like you were checking them out at a library, right? But she would just, you know, here, but please bring them back. So then I'd bring them back and she'd say, if you bring them back, I'll give you more to take home and look at. But National Geographic also reported it. So those that think that this is just not verified, and they so rely on what they consider mainstream media. But the truth is when you trust your gut in that inner spirit, that God spark inside of you, the truth will ring true. You're going to know the truth. You don't, you know, can definitely, I'm an information gatherer and I've been an archiver for years. So you can definitely fetter out aspects, but you're going to know it. You're going to feel it. Like one of my mentors used to say, you're going to feel it in your bones, Melissa. You're going to feel it in your bones. And boy, he was right. And it was interesting because I had gotten a visit from him one time in a house where we lived that I had found. And it was quite amazing how we got this old place. But this was the plot of an original farm house for some farmland. And then as I dug and dug, I found out it was a burial land for some Native Americans. And some of the things that went on there were quite interesting. And I'll just leave it at that. And it wasn't just for me. This happened to other people in my family where we all lived there. And quite the experiences. So back here, during his 22-year reign, Hot Springs became a haven for notorious criminals and mobsters. So this would have been during the McLaughlin reign, who had used, you know, Motor Rod, whatever you want to call it. You know what I'm talking about. That's what I probably should have called it. Motor Rod. And other unlawful tactics to drive his political machine. And that's really what goes on. The driving of an entity is what I think of it, a political machine. So Hot Springs became a haven for these criminals and mobsters, including Owen, Oni, Madden, Charles, Lucky, Luciano, and Al Capone. It's easy to see, and I talked about their reign in Chicago along with who their their enemy was, and it was very interesting. So that was one of the prior videos. It's easy to see how Hot Springs became a haven for criminals. One of the most notorious was Oni, the killer Madden, referred to as the English Godfather. Madden arrived in Hot Springs in 1935, seeking a slower lifestyle than the one he was accustomed to in New York City. Originally from England, Madden grew up in the rough neighborhoods of Manhattan's Hell's Kitchen and is credited with putting the organized into organized crime. Well respected and well-liked, Madden settled into Hot Springs very easily. Eventually, more and more gangsters arrived. Word spread that Hot Springs was the perfect hideout for criminals running from police investigations. It is said that Al Capone and his bodyguards would rent out entire floors of hotels. And that goes back to that hotel that Nate and I went into, and I saw it right away, and I asked about going in there, and in we went, and I got to take some footage and some photos, and I told you about that wild bathroom. So, anyhow, interesting, wild. That hotel just, the feeling, just the sense of I like to get the sense of the atmosphere, not just look at it, but, you can get a feel for the vibrations in there, and it was something else. But he would rent out the entire fourth floor, is what has been said. So, well respected and well liked. He, Al Capone, gangster activity in Hot Springs came to an end in the 1960s due to a federal crackdown on what the government called the site of the largest illegal gambling operation in the U.S. Remnants of the city's notorious past can still be found inside the Gangster Museum of America, located in downtown Hot Springs. The museum features classic relics, including old roulette tables, vintage slot machines, Madden and Capone exhibits, weapons, and a documentary in the museum's theater. And that you can gaze at if you're in. They're remodeling the Arlington Hotel, which used to be on the grounds, from what I understood, of where the park is right now, right there downtown Hot Springs. And now it's located across, but it's been there for years. Now they're remodeling it, and if you go out and go around the corner, you can see this Gangster Museum right across the street. And then the Vapors, as I was talking about, that is in another location, and its history is very interesting, and I hope to get into that the next time. Let's just go back here real quickly. So to link up with that story, within 5 years, gambling was shut down. This is what is interesting. Here's some linkage into some of the history behind what I was talking about. Honestly, if you want to get real technical, with the Bush family. And the Bush family goes back to some linkage with Nazi Germany and some roots with what was going on there. And of course, as many of you know, what my generals and what my mentors always referred to as Poppy, they refer to Poppy Bush. The first Bush, the dad, the one with the funeral and all the iconic symbolism around it, for both sides, I might add, for dark and light. So he was the one that was said to have been in that photograph there by the, on those streets that I had covered for JFK's assassination. People had identified him in photos, is what I'm trying to say. So hold on here, let me see. Okay, so basically, well, hold on again. All right, sorry about that. You could probably see it. It's probably in what is being taken as footage, but my battery was low, and then it wasn't linking up properly to charge. So, okay, so we're about finished here, but it was Rockefeller that that would have been tied to the Rockefeller family. Is what I'm saying, tied to what happened over there in 9/11. So that's interesting how that ties into who was president at that time, and then also for the Poppy Bush. He was the first director of the CIA, is what I'm getting at. All right, so I'm going to let you go because an hour should be enough, right? I mean, I could talk to you guys forever. Clearly, this interesting is off the charts incredible. And I'll go back and make sure that in my article and prior video, I had covered that rich history of Al Capone on the streets of Chicago. And if not, I will cover it, but it's definitely in my article. And I'll drop the link as soon as I get a chance into either the, the description of the video or in the comments. Take care, guys. Have a super day. Thanks for tuning in.